Fegan looked at each of his companions in turn. Of the 5 soldiers, 3 were Brits and 2 were Ulster Defence Regiment. Another of the followers was a cop, his Royal Ulster Constabulary uniform neat and stiff, and 2 more were loyalists, both Ulster freedom fighters. The remaining 4 were civilians who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He remembered doing all of them, but it was the civilians whose memories screamed the loudest. There was the butcher, with his round face and bloody apron. Fegan had dropped the package in his shop and held the door for the woman and her baby as she wheeled the pram in. They'd smiled at each other. He'd felt the heat of the blast as he jumped into the already moving car, the blast that should have come 5 minutes after they'd cleared the place. The other was the boy. Fegan still remembered the look in his eyes when he saw the pistol. Now the boy sat across the table, those same eyes boring into him. Fegan couldn't hold his gaze, so he turned his eyes downward. Tears pooled on the tabletop. He brought his fingers to the hollows of his face and realised he'd been weeping. "Jesus," he said. He wiped the table with his sleeve and sniffed back the tears. The pub's stale air clung to the back of his throat, as thick as the dun-coloured paint on the walls. He scolded himself. He neither needed nor deserved pity, least of all his own. Weaker men than him could live with what they'd done. He could do the same. A hand on his shoulder startled him. "Time you were going, Jerry," Michael McKenna said. Tom slipped into the storeroom behind the bar. McKenna paid him to be discreet, to see and hear nothing. Fegan knew the politician would come looking for him. He was smartly dressed in a jacket and trousers, and his fine-framed designer glasses gave him the appearance of an educated man. A far cry from the teenager Fegan had run the streets with 30 years ago. Wealth looked good on him. "I'm just finishing," Fegan said. "Well, drink up and I'll run you home." McKenna smiled down at him, his teeth white and even. He'd had them fixed so he could look presentable for the cameras. The party leadership had insisted on it before they gave him the nomination for his seat in the Assembly. At one time, not so long past, it had been against party policy to take a seat at Stormont. But times change, even if people don't. "I'll walk," Fegan said. "It's only a couple of minutes." "It's no trouble," McKenna said. "Besides, I wanted a word." Fegan nodded and took another mouthful of stout. He held it on his tongue when he noticed the boy had risen from his place on the other side of the table. It took a moment to find him, shirtless and skinny as the day he died, creeping up behind McKenna. The boy pointed at the politician's head. He mimed firing, his hand thrown upwards by the recoil. His mouth made a plosive movement, but no sound came. Fegan swallowed the Guinness and stared at the boy. Something stirred in his mind, one memory trying to find another. The chill at his centre pulsed with his heartbeat. "Do you remember that kid?" he asked. "Don't, Jerry." McKenna's voice carried a warning. "I met his mother today. I was in the graveyard and she came up to me." "I know you did," McKenna said, taking the glass from Fegan's fingers. "She said she knew who I was, what I'd done. She said—" "Jerry, I don't want to know what she said. I'm more curious about what you said to her. That's what we need to talk about. But not here." McKenna squeezed Fegan's shoulder. "Come on now." "He hadn't done anything. Not really. He didn't tell the cops anything they didn't know already. He didn't deserve that. Jesus, he was 17. We didn't have to—" One hard hand gripped Fegan's face, the other his thinning hair, and the animal inside McKenna showed itself. "Shut your fucking mouth," he hissed. "Remember who you're talking to." Fegan remembered only too well.